He conquered Europe in mere months and commanded the most feared military force in modern history. Yet, by May 1945, Adolf Hitler was dead by his own hand, while Soviet tanks crushed the rubble of Berlin above his bunker. A war machine that seemed unstoppable in 1940 completely collapsed just 5 years later. This was not the result of one battle or one mistake, but a series of catastrophic blunders, industrial failures, and strategic gambles that simply didn't pay off. This is the story of exactly why Germany lost the Second World War. The first crack in the armor appeared early in the summer of 1940, when Britain stood alone. Hitler expected them to surrender, but they refused. To invade, Germany needed to control the skies, so the Luftwaffe threw everything they had at the Royal Air Force. Thousands of planes clashed over the English Channel, but the Germans switched tactics too often. They bombed airfields and then cities, losing focus. British pilots, aided by radar technology, shot down nearly 2 Luftwaffe planes for every one they lost. By October 1940, Hitler had to cancel the invasion and suffer his first real defeat. Britain remained free as an unsinkable aircraft carrier parked right off the coast of Europe, waiting for the Americans to arrive. Hitler grew impatient and tore up his non-aggression pact with Stalin on June 22, 1941, launching the largest invasion in human history. Operation Barbarossa sent 3 million Axis troops surging into the Soviet Union. At first, it looked like another easy victory as the Red Army collapsed. German panzers raced hundreds of miles to encircle entire Russian armies at Minsk and Kiev, capturing millions of prisoners. However, the map was too big, and the distances destroyed their supply lines. Tanks ran out of fuel, while soldiers marched until their boots fell apart. Hitler believed the Soviet Union was a rotting structure that would collapse with one kick. But he was wrong. The structure held. Then came the cold. German planners had expected victory before winter, so they hadn't even ordered winter uniforms. In November 1941, temperatures outside Moscow dropped to 40 degrees below zero. Oil froze inside engine blocks and weapons jammed. Soldiers stuffed newspapers into their jackets to stop frostbite, but thousands died from the cold alone. German generals begged to retreat and regroup, but Hitler forbade it and ordered them to stand fast. While the Germans froze, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack with fresh troops from Siberia, equipped with ski battalions and tanks built for the snow. The German army was pushed back from the gates of Moscow. The Blitzkrieg was dead, and the long war had begun. If you are finding this breakdown of history fascinating, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon, because we release deep explorations like this every week. Now let's look at Hitler's most puzzling decision. 4 days after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, Hitler made perhaps his single greatest error on December 11, 1941, by declaring war on the United States. He didn't have to, since the treaty with Japan was defensive and only required help if Japan was attacked. But Hitler believed the US was already fighting him in the Atlantic and wanted to show solidarity with Japan. It was suicide, because he brought the world's largest industrial power into the conflict against him. The US economy was larger than all other combatants combined, and American factories would soon be churning out planes and tanks faster than Germany could make bullets. He had turned a European war into a global one he could not win. While armies clashed on the field, Germany was losing a war they didn't even know they were fighting. The British codebreakers at Bletchley Park had cracked the Enigma machine, which was the device Germany used to encrypt top-secret radio messages. For years, Allied commanders read Hitler's orders before his own generals did. They knew where the U-boats were hunting, when supplies were arriving, and exactly where Rommel was sending his tanks in Africa. Historians estimate this intelligence, codenamed Ultra, shortened the war by 2 years. German commanders became paranoid and blamed spies for leaks, never suspecting that their own unbreakable code had been broken. Hitler never cared much for North Africa, but it became a bleeding wound for his empire. He sent Erwin Rommel to rescue the failing Italian army. Rommel was brilliant, but starved of supplies because the British Navy sank the tankers carrying fuel to his panzers, aided by that cracked Enigma code. At the Second Battle of El Alamein in late 1942, the British 8th Army crushed the German Afrika Korps. This wasn't just a battle over sand, because losing North Africa meant the Allies controlled the Mediterranean Sea. It exposed the soft underbelly of Europe and gave the Americans a launchpad to invade Italy, forcing Hitler to divert precious troops south just when he needed them most in the east. The war was truly decided in a city on the Volga River. In August 1942, the German 6th Army attacked Stalingrad, which became a brutal personal obsession for Hitler because the city bore Stalin's name. The fighting devolved into savage, hand-to-hand combat in ruined basements and sewers. The Germans took 90% of the city, but couldn't take the last river crossings. Then the trap snapped shut as the Soviets launched a massive encirclement, trapping 300,000 Axis soldiers inside the ruins. They starved and froze until Field Marshal Paulus finally surrendered in February 1943. Nearly the entire army was gone, and the myth of German invincibility died in the snow of Stalingrad. Hitler tried one last time to regain the initiative in July 1943 by gathering the greatest concentration of tanks in warfare history near the city of Kursk. New Tiger and Panther tanks were rushed to the front, although many broke down before they reached the battlefield. The Soviets knew they were coming and built endless lines of minefields and anti-tank ditches. When the German attack began, it smashed into a wall of steel. The Battle of Kursk destroyed the backbone of the German armored divisions, costing them men and machines they could not replace. After Kursk, the German army never launched a major offensive in the east again, and could only retreat. German generals often complained about the endless waves of Soviet equipment, without admitting where much of it came from. The American Lend-Lease program pumped $11 billion worth of supplies into the Soviet Union, which is over $150 billion today. We are talking about 400,000 trucks, 14,000 airplanes, and millions of tons of food. While German soldiers relied on horses to pull their supplies, the Red Army rode into battle on American Studebaker trucks. Soviet dictator Nikita Khrushchev later admitted that without this aid, they would have lost. The sheer weight of American industry kept the Soviet war machine moving when it might have otherwise stalled. While soldiers fought on the ground, the German homeland was being erased from the air. The Allies launched a round-the-clock bombing campaign, with Americans bombing by day and the British by night. They targeted factories, rail yards, and entire cities, until places like Hamburg, Cologne, and Dresden were turned to ash. This forced the Luftwaffe to pull its fighters back from the front lines to defend Germany. It also forced German industry underground, where they still managed to build planes and tanks they couldn't move because the rail network was shattered. By 1944, Germany was a fortress without a roof and completely exposed to destruction from above. Machines need fuel, and Germany had none. This was the single biggest bottleneck of the war, because Germany had no natural oil reserves and relied on synthetic fuel made from coal and imports from Romania. The Allies knew this and bombed the synthetic oil plants relentlessly until German fuel production had dropped by 90% by September 1944. Brand new jet fighters sat on runways because they had no fuel to fly, and panzer divisions had to abandon their tanks in the middle of battles and walk home. The most advanced war machine in the world was grounded, not by enemy fire, but by an empty gas tank. On June 6, 1944, the nightmare scenario became real when Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy and opened a new front in the west. Hitler had always feared a two-front war, but his own incompetence made it worse. He refused to release his panzer reserves on D-Day because he was asleep, and his staff was afraid to wake him. By the time he gave the order, it was too late, and the Allies had a foothold. Now Germany was being squeezed from both sides as the Americans and British pushed from the west, while the Soviets steamrolled from the east. The Third Reich was shrinking by the day. In the end, it was a numbers game. In 1944, despite the bombing, Germany produced 40,000 aircraft, but the United States produced 96,000 planes that same year, and the Soviet Union built another 40,000. For every tank Germany destroyed, the Allies built 10 more. For every soldier killed, 10 more took his place. Germany simply ran out of men and started drafting teenagers and old men into the Volkssturm militia, arming them with cheap rockets and bicycles. You cannot defeat an industrial giant with sheer willpower, because the economic disparity was impossible to overcome. We cannot ignore the man at the top. Hitler believed he was a military genius, but he was merely a gambler who got lucky early and then refused to quit. He ignored his experienced generals and fired them when they told him the truth. He refused to allow tactical retreats that could have saved entire armies. He obsessed over holding every inch of ground, which meant his forces were constantly surrounded and destroyed. He wasted resources on wonder weapons like the V-2 rocket that killed civilians but had zero impact on the battlefield. His rigid leadership accelerated the collapse. By April 1945, the Red Army was in Berlin, and the city was a wasteland. Hitler retreated to his bunker to move imaginary armies on a map that no longer existed. On April 30th, he took his own life, and 7 days later, Germany surrendered. The 1,000-year Reich had lasted just 12 years, leaving behind a continent in ruins and millions of dead. Germany lost because they started a war they couldn't finish against enemies they couldn't match, led by a man who wouldn't listen to reason. It was a total defeat, born of total arrogance. The defeat of Nazi Germany wasn't just about superior firepower. It was the result of a system built on lies and hate, colliding with the unified resolve of the rest of the world. From the snows of Russia to the factories of Detroit, the war proved that industrial might and strategic cooperation will always dismantle a regime built on isolation and terror. If you want to understand more about the specific battles that shaped this outcome, check out our playlist on the Eastern Front. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.